Welcome to our last lecture for week 14. We're just a couple of weeks now from the end of the semester. I have to cover a couple of things, so this will take a little longer. The reading lecture was only a few minutes this week, um, and this may take just a few minutes longer because we're covering two kind of important concepts. One is a grammar concept, and one is about how to use quotations in your writing, which is a really important thing to be able to do, not only in this class, but as you go forward in any kind of academic, but also in business writing as well, and lots of different places. But quotations can be an important thing and can be hard to do sometimes. So we'll look at both pronouns and quotations today. Um, just a reminder, essay assignment 7 is due April 29th, and it's over addiction and recovery. And I covered this in the overview lecture, so if you want to go take a look at that. But you can also just read through these topics and you can see how they're all related to addiction and recovery, but also potentially can relate to our story, Sonny's Blues, because Sonny's struggling with addiction himself. So pronouns, you can find more about these. I'm going to cover just a little bit, but this is in the Hardbrace Essentials, HE 299 to 314. Those are the page numbers. If you have a different edition, it's section 21A, 21F. This is in the grammar part, sort of near the end of the book. But a pronoun is defined as a word that refers to a noun or noun phrase already mentioned. That's what's called the antecedent. So without pronouns, obviously it would be hard to speak because, I mean, it would be time consuming because I couldn't say I would have to say Tom all the time, which that doesn't sound like such a big deal, but it can become a big deal when we can't replace proper nouns and things that are longer and things like that. So anyway, pronouns are very useful, but they can also cause lots of problems. It can trip us up. So let's look at just a couple of things real quickly. The antecedent, again, is the word that's replaced. So you don't have to memorize that. It's not going to be on the quiz, although there might be a question about pronouns in general and how to use them on the quiz, but not the terminology. But John would be the antecedent here. We're going to replace that. We're going to use he, like I said. John said he. So he's a pronoun replacing John. The participant with the most experience said he would guide the trip. So again, here we have a whole noun phrase, and he just refers back to this. It replaces this. So we don't say the participant with the most experience said the participant with the most experience would guide the trip. We just say he. So again, that's the basic relationship with pronouns and antecedents. Antecedents, those words that are replaced. So no problem so far. And all this is, I think, pretty clear to most people. But we'll get into a couple of areas where it gets a little tricky. Personal pronouns are just like it sounds like. They refer to people, places, and things sometimes. But singular personal pronouns would be like I, me, you, because it's just one, right? He, him, she, her, it. Plural are going to be, again, more than one person. We, us, you, they, them. So this just has to have agreement. We're going to talk about what that means in just a minute, but just again, we're just defining some terms here real quickly. There's also what are called possessive pronouns, and they show ownership. So, and again, singular would be like that's my, mine, your, yours, his, her, hers, its. Or if it's plural, something that we own collectively or together, our, ours, your, yours, their, theirs. What you want to do is just avoid confusing possessive forms. This is one of the most common errors that people can make with common contractions. Remember, a contraction is where you take like it is and you put the apostrophe and it's its. But its can also be what's called a possessive pronoun. So every dog has its collar or something like that, right? But it is written like this, and its is written just its without the apostrophe. They are is written like this, but then the common pronoun is up here, like their. So this is actually their car. This is they are. We talked about this a while back, early in the semester, when I shared with you some commonly misused words. And of course, these pronouns are really easy to misuse. The trick is if you read this and you put in the word that's missing, the letter that's missing, they are, you know you're not going to say it is they are car, right? You're going to say it's their car like this instead of like this. Same thing with who. This is who is, but then whose, well, we don't have that, but a possessive pronoun, W-H-O-S-E, would be like that. So again, this is a very easy thing to confuse, so I wanted to mention that with possessive pronouns. You know, a lot of times what will happen if you're just in Microsoft Word or Google, just make sure you have the feature. Sometimes you can disable it, but you want to have the grammar checker on, and then that'll tell you usually if you're misusing these. It's definitely something that grammar checker would catch, I think. Reflexive pronouns, like they sound, they reflect back, right? So things like myself, yourself, himself, I myself judged, questioned the judge, right? Um, so, this is reflecting back to ourselves, yourself or themselves. So what we want to do is don't use a reflexive pronoun. This is, again, I'm just sharing with you the kind of the common mistakes that happen with these. There's lots of rules around them, but each one of these is just one of the common mistakes that can happen. We use a reflexive pronoun as a subject. So that's something you want to avoid. We do this all the time. I say things like this, but technically it's not grammatically correct. Mr. Palmquist and myself. So really, myself, a lot of times I think people use that word just because it sounds more formal, but it's only, it's not good to be used as the subject. We would want to say Mr. Palmquist and I discussed our concern. And that may sound funny to some people, but again, I is a subject pronoun. Myself is usually used as an object. It's something to reflect back. I is a subject here, and then myself comes after. You can see that. So again, we try not to use these reflexive pronouns like myself, yourself, himself as a subject of a sentence. So to really use pronouns effectively, there are three things you have to understand. We've already mentioned part of these. One of them is person, which like it sounds, it tells you if we're talking about I as the first person, we call it I did this, I went here, or you as what's called second person. You were here, you did this, or he or she or they, that's the third person. So we'll often talk about first person, second person, third person, and we're going to talk about in a minute why that's important, but that's one of the things you have to understand to be able to use pronouns effectively and consistently. It's just understanding whether you're writing in first person, like I did something, or second person, or third person. You also have to understand the number, right? We talked about plural and singular. And then lastly, case. Case just means, words can be used as different parts of speech. For example, something can be used as a noun or subject rather. Something can be used as an object. Knowing whether something's being used as a subject or an object can tell you a lot about whether you're using the correct form of it. So these are three things we're going to look at. First one is person. Person indicates whether a pronoun refers to the writer, first person, I, right? I am happy to be here. Unfortunately, we were late. This is still first person. It's just more than one person. It's plural. So first person means I'm the one speaking or we are the one speaking. Or to the reader, the person listening, that's second person. Were you still at the restaurant? What is your dog's name? So you can see how that's the person we're talking to or about. Or another person, that's third person. Not the reader, not you, and not I, but this other person, third person. He was the only person in the room. And what was her answer? So these are pronouns that are first person, second person, third person. Generally, these should be consistent. So if you're writing a sentence, you're probably, or even a paper, you're probably staying in the first person, second person, third person. Now, first person, a lot of times, is too informal for a lot of academic writing. Some professors will tell you, don't use first and second person. Second person can be very informal. First person can be okay if you're writing more like a personal essay. But generally in academic writing, we kind of look at the third person more. We tend to say the person did this and they did this and his ideas and this professor said, this writer said. So third person is usually what's preferred for more formal academic writing. Number reveals whether a pronoun is singular or plural. So I went home, we went home. That's very simple, right? So again, if you're talking about more than one person, you want to use this plural. Do you have the book? And when did you dance? So this is kind of interesting because in English, we don't have this second person plural, right? And that's why where I grew up, everybody says y'all. You guys might have heard that expression before, right? You all, y'all. But that's a Southern thing because we don't have a second person plural pronoun. And people from probably in Chicago, they might be more likely to say you guys or something. Or if you're from Brooklyn, you might say use guys. But this is something I think English should have. So I think using y'all and you guys or use guys is a good what we call adaptation. But anyway, that's second person. It's the same, doesn't change. And then it is him, it is them. So again, we have singular and plural. So that's number. And then finally, the last thing is what's called case. This is a little more complicated, but you might have always heard, you might have had trouble sometimes, or you've heard English teachers trying to tell you, why do you use who and why do you use whom? And that has to do with this case, right? It's just if it's a subject of a sentence or it's the object. So like if I did something, I'm the subject, right? I hit, what did I hit? I hit the ball, right? And the ball is the object then, right? But the ball could be the subject of a sentence too. And then also possessive is another case if something shows ownership. So let's look at just an example of how that would look. I solved the problem, not me solved the problem. And again, you might just say, well, I can hear that, but there is a grammar rule behind that. And the reason we don't say me solved the problem is because I is a subject pronoun. It's I is the subject. But if the problem was solved by me, that sounds perfectly right, because then me is good because it's an object pronoun. So again, this is all kind of complex grammar, but again, this is one of the most common things that's misused, especially who and whom. So who is a subject pronoun, whom is an object pronoun. So the ball was thrown to whom, that's fine, but you don't say whom threw the ball, because then it's a subject. You want to say who threw the ball. So again, this may all seem kind of picky. If you've gotten this far in the video, congratulations, because I know grammar's not everybody's favorite thing. But these are, again, just some basic rules that come up often, so I'm sharing these. Marissa and I solved the problem, not me and Marissa. When I was a kid, my mom would always correct me. I would say, me and Jim went to the store. And she said, is Jim mean? And I was like, what? She said, you said mean Jim. And I said, no, I said me and Jim. She said, well, that's not correct. You should say Jim and I, because you're subject pronoun, right? So my mom was like that. I don't do that to my kids. He and I joined the club in July. So again, these are subject pronouns, he and I, not him and I. Even though that might sound correct, him is more used as the object of a sentence. It was given to him. And so again, these are things that are not going to really cause a lot of miscommunication, but sometimes they can. So again, and this is probably the most difficult one, determining the case. And finally, in the objective case here, I actually have one more. The whole staff admired him. Again, see how we can say it's the object. The staff is a subject, and they admired him. But if you reverse this and put him as a subject, you would say he was admired by the staff. That might be different. The staff sent him a card. The staff depended on him. Again, staff is our subject. Him is an object, so we're putting him. They will not appoint you or me, or they will appoint you or me, not they will appoint you or I, because they is a subject and me is an object. So even though it might sound correct to say they will appoint you or I, it really should be they will appoint you or me, because it's at that object position in the sentence. They lent Tom or me money for tuition, not they lent Tom or I money, because again, they are the subject, me is the object, and that's the correct. We use I for if it's the subject. Last one, possessive case. So this is when ownership. Their budget is higher than ours. Is the new car in the parking lot yours? Is your new car parked outside? So again, these are in the possessive case, so we're using these possessive pronouns. So let's take a little quiz. Again, if you got this far, congratulations. I know grammar can be kind of not the most exciting thing, but it can be useful. So let's look at this one. The board of directors asked me or I to translate the documents. So the board of directors asked, who's the subject? So we would say the board of directors is the subject. So we have to choose either a subject pronoun or an object pronoun here. I need the Jeopardy music. When me and my brother and I, you have to choose one. We're in middle school, we formed a band. So this is the subject now. My brother and I formed a band. My brother and me, whichever one, you have to decide. He, him, and his cousin called us. So whichever one you want to choose, he called us or him called us, which sounds right. One of these, this is a subject pronoun, this is an object pronoun. So whichever is correct. They asked I or they asked me to be in charge of operations. After we played together that afternoon, we decided to call ourself or ourselves. Was it singular or plural? The Crash. That was the band that they decided to become. So if you want to pause and just circle, or just sort of mark whichever one of these, and then I'll show you the answers. So board of directors asked me. They asked me. The board of directors is the subject, and then this is the object pronoun. They asked me. If I said I asked the board of directors, that'd be fine, right? But it's they asked me, so object pronoun. When my brother and I, so I was in middle school, my brother was in middle school, we formed a band. He and his cousin called us. He called us, right? Not no, it would be, what was that one? Let's see the choice on that one. He or him. Yeah, we wouldn't say him called us. They asked me. So not they asked I, because it's a subject. I would be a subject pronoun, but this is an object. After we played together that afternoon, we decided to call ourselves, that's a plural, instead of just ourself, which would be singular. So ourselves. All right. So again, if you got this far, good job. The last thing I want to do real quickly is just talk about how to avoid plagiarism, which plagiarism is when you're using somebody else's ideas incorrectly or without giving them credit. And to do that, you have to be able to integrate your ideas with quotation marks and some kind of citations. So this is a really brief passage here. Well, it's a paragraph. And I'm just sharing this. So if you wanted to pause it and look at this, you could, because we're going to be mentioning this as we go through and talk about how to do this. And notice we're using what's called MLA style. That's a modern language association. That's what all English teachers will ask you to use. Probably several other disciplines. I think history. There's a few social sciences I think that might use MLA. But you'll either have APA or MLA. Your teachers should usually tell you if you're writing especially a research paper which format they want. If you take English 102, they're going to expect MLA style. So and then some other disciplines too. But anyway, this is a short passage about the Mississippi River, and it's written by Robert McNeil and William Cran in their book, Do You Speak American? And this is from page 1. So to cite this, if it comes up, what we're going to look at, for example, if you're using an exact sentence from a source, so you use their exact words, right? That's a quotation, the whole sentence. Then you want to put quotation marks around the sentence. See how they've done this here? McNeil and Cran write, comma, and here's their exact sentence. Our language is constantly changing. And use a signal phrase. Signal phrase is this, where they say McNeil and Cran write, or down here, they broke it up. Our language, comma, and here's our signal phrase. This is not part of the quotation. You're adding this. According to McNeil and Cran is constantly changing. And then you put the page number. Now, this is assuming you're only using one source by McNeil and Cran. Like if you had 3 sources by McNeil and Cran, you might have to do the citation differently. But you've just got one from this person, so it's enough. You listed the name of the person, and then you put the page number it can be found on. That's if you're using an exact sentence. There's different things you can do, though. If you're using a few exact words, not the whole sentence, you can do it like this. You put quotation marks around the exact words. So, like the Mississippi, all you used from them is like the Mississippi. You used 3 of their words, but still, if you're using their idea, you want to cite this. And you use a signal phrase, and it has to be a little more involved sometimes when you're using just a few words. The English language, according to McNeil and Cran, is quotation marks. Like the Mississippi, this is on page 1. Again, this is just different ways of using your sources, integrating them in without committing plagiarism, which is using somebody else's ideas without giving them credit. If you're paraphrasing or summarizing the source, so paraphrase. So sometimes we might think, oh, I'm using my own words. I put it in my own words. But if you're still using their ideas, even if you're not using their exact words, if you use their ideas, it's still plagiarism unless you give them credit. So how would you do that? You introduce the ideas with a signal phrase. Again, McNeil and Cran argue that changes in the English language are natural. So you've got your McNeil and Cran argue, and then this is your paraphrase, right? Changes in the English language are natural and that they represent cultural progress. So you just took what they said and put it in your own words. You don't need quotation marks, right? Do not use quotation marks. But you just basically use their idea and give credit. And you put the page number so somebody can go to that page and say, or I could, as a professor or somebody else could go to that page and say, oh yeah, that, and now if you get it wrong, that's another form of plagiarism, right? That's called just misrepresenting. So when you do summarize, you want to make sure that you're actually using their meaning, because sometimes people do that intentionally, like they kind of change the meaning, and that's another form of plagiarism. But as long as you're citing your source and you're doing your best to represent their ideas accurately, you're not committing plagiarism. All right, so let's look. If you have used the source's sentence structure, but substituted a few synonyms, and notice it says, stop, exclamation mark. This is a form of plagiarism. Even if you use a signal phrase and a page number, you can't just like take out 1 or 2 words, right? So here's a plagiarized version. McNeil and Cran claim that, like a river, English creates new waterways. So they just put a couple of synonyms and they gave credit, but that's still kind of plagiarism because they didn't. It's better just to go ahead and integrate and cite correctly. Quote, like the Mississippi, English keeps forging new channels. And it's just better to use that instead of sort of just... Now, of course, the other real extreme way of plagiarizing is not even mentioning their name. So at least if you're mentioning their name, it's very easy to fix. but you do want to try to, if you just put in a few synonyms, it's still kind of plagiarism can be. All right, so that is the end. Again, this is just about how to integrate quotations. And as always, if you have any questions about either one of these, let me know. Probably on, you can guess, right? If you're watching this on quiz number 5, you'll have something about how to integrate a quotation, maybe something about pronouns on that last quiz of the semester. So again, I have office hours always on Mondays and Tuesdays from 1 to 2 in Blackboard Collaborate, or you can always visit me. I'm in 317C, 12 to 1, Monday through Thursday. Hope everybody has a good rest of your week, and if you're watching this on Monday, and hopefully no more rain. I'd like to see some sun. We'll hopefully see that. Thanks for watching this.